Before proceeding further, it will be necessary to retrace our steps for a short time, and see what was done by Maurice Wyville after the alarming announcement made to him by the apprentice. Of a selfish nature and ungovernable temper, and seeking only in the pursuit of the grocer's daughter the gratification of his lawless desires, he was filled, in the first instance, with furious disappointment at being robbed of the prize, at the very moment he expected it to fall into his hands. But this feeling was quickly effaced by anxiety respecting his mistress, whose charms, now that there was every probability of losing her, for Leonard's insinuation had led him to believe she was assailed by the pestilence, appeared doubly attractive to him, and scarcely under the governance of reason, he hurried towards Wood Street, resolved to force his way into the house, and see her again, at all hazards. His wild design, however, was fortunately prevented. As he passed the end of the court leading to the ancient inn, for it was ancient even at the time of this history, the Swan with Two Necks, in Lad Lane, a young man, as richly attired as himself, and about his own age, who had seen him approaching, suddenly darted from it, and grasping his cloak, detained him. "I thought it must be you, Wyville," cried this person. "Where are you running so quickly? I see neither angry father, nor jealous apprentice, at your heels. What has become of the girl? Are you tired of her already?" "Let me go, Lydiard," returned Wyville, trying to extricate himself from his companion's hold, who was no other than the gallant that had accompanied him on his first visit to the grocer's shop, and had played his part so adroitly in the scheme devised between them to procure an interview with Amabel. "Let me go, I say, I am in no mood for jesting." "Why, what the plague is the matter?" rejoined Lydiard. "Has your mistress played you false? Have you lost your wager?" "The plague is the matter," replied Wyville, sternly. "Amabel is attacked by it. I must see her instantly." "The devil!" exclaimed Lydiard. "Here is a pretty termination to the affair. But if this is really the case, you must not see her. It is one thing to be run through the arm, which you must own I managed as dexterously as the best master of fence could have done, and lose a few drops of blood for a mistress, but it is another to brave the plague on her account." "I care for nothing," replied Wyville, "I will see her." "This is madness," remonstrated Lydiard, still maintaining his grasp. "What satisfaction will it afford you to witness her sufferings, to see the frightful ravages made upon her charms by this remorseless disease, to throw her whole family into consternation, and destroy the little chance she may have of recovery, by your presence? What good will this do? No, you must pay your wager to Sedley, and forget her." "I cannot forget her," replied Wyville. "My feelings have undergone a total change. If I am capable of real love, it is for her." "Real love!" exclaimed Lydiard, in an incredulous tone. "If the subject were not too serious, I should laugh in your face. No doubt you would marry her, and abandon your design upon the rich heiress, pretty Mistress Mallet, whom old Rowley recommended to your attention, and whom the fair steward has more than half won for you?" "I would," replied the other, energetically. "Nay, then, you are more insane than I thought you," rejoined Lydiard, relinquishing his hold, "and the sooner you take the plague the better. It may cure your present brain fever. I shall go back to Paravicin and the others. You will not require my assistance further." "I know not," replied Wyville, distractedly. "I have not yet given up my intention of carrying off the girl." "If you carry her off in this state," rejoined the other, "it must be to the pest house." "But who told you she was attacked by the plague?" "Her father's apprentice," replied Wyville. "And you believed him?" demanded Lydiard, with a derisive laugh. "Undoubtedly," replied Wyville. "Why not?" "Because it is evidently a mere trick to frighten you from the house," rejoined Lydiard. "I am surprised so shallow a device should succeed with you." "I wish I could persuade myself it was a trick," returned Wyville. but the fellow's manner convinced me he was in earnest. "Well, I will not dispute the point, though I am sure I am right," returned Lydiard. "But be not too precipitate. Since the apprentice has seen you, some alteration may be necessary in your plans. Come with me into the house. A few minutes can make no difference." Wyville suffered himself to be led up the court, and passing through a door on the left, they entered a spacious room, across which ran a long table, furnished at one end with wine and refreshments, and at the other with cards and dice. 3 persons were seated at the table, the most noticeable of whom was a dissipated-looking young man, dressed in the extremity of the prevailing mode, with ruffles of the finest colbertine, 3 inches in depth, at his wrists, a richly laced cravat round his throat, white silk hose, adorned with gold clocks, velvet shoes of the same color as the hose, fastened with immense roses, a silver-hilted sword, supported by a broad embroidered silk band, and a cloak and doublet of carnation-colored velvet, woven with gold, and decorated with innumerable glittering points and ribbons. He had a flowing wig of flaxen hair, and a broad-leaved hat, looped with a diamond buckle, and placed negligently on the left side of his head. His figure was slight, but extremely well-formed, and his features might have been termed handsome, but for their reckless and licentious expression. He was addressed by his companions as Sir Paul Paravison. The person opposite to him, whose name was Disbrow, and who was likewise a very handsome young man, though his features were flushed and disturbed, partly by the wine he had drunk, and partly by his losses at play, was equipped in the splendid accoutrements of a captain in the king's bodyguard. His left hand convulsively clutched an empty purse, and his eyes were fixed upon a large sum of money, which he had just handed over to the knight, and which the latter was carelessly transferring to his pocket. The last of the 3, whose looks betrayed his character, that of a sharper and a bully, called himself Major Pillicotty, his pretensions to military rank being grounded upon his service, so ran his own statement, though it was never clearly substantiated, in the king's army during the civil wars. Major Pillicotty was a man of remarkably fierce exterior. Seamed with many scars, and destitute of the left eye, the orifice of which was covered with a huge black patch, his face was of a deep mulberry color, clearly attesting his devotion to the bottle, while his nose, which was none of the smallest, was covered with bubucles, and whelks, and knobs, and flames of fire. He was of the middle size, stoutly built, and given to corpulency, though not so much so as to impair his activity. His attire consisted of a cloak and doublet of scarlet cloth, very much stained and tarnished, and edged with gold lace, likewise the worse for wear, jack-boots, with huge funnel tops, spurs, with enormous rowels, and a rapier of preposterous length. He wore his own hair, which was swart and woolly, like that of a negro, and had beard and mustaches to match. His hat was fiercely cocked, his gestures swaggering and insolent, and he was perpetually racking his brain to invent new and extraordinary oaths. "So soon returned," cried Paravison, as Wyville appeared. "Accept my congratulations?" "And mine," cried Pillicotty. "We wild fellows have but to be seen to conquer. Sugar and spice, and all that's nice," he added, smacking his lips, as he filled a glass from a long-necked bottle on the table. "May the grocer's daughter prove sweeter than her father's plums, and more melting than his butter. Is she without? Are we to see her?" Wyville made no answer, but, walking to the other end of the room, threw himself into a chair, and, covering his face with his hands, appeared wrapped in thought. Lydiard took a seat beside him, and endeavored to engage him in conversation, but, finding his efforts fruitless, he desisted. "Something is wrong," observed Paravison to the Major. "He has been foiled in his attempt to carry off the girl. Sedley has won his wager, and it is a heavy sum. Shall we resume our play?" he added, to Disbrow. "I have nothing more to lose," observed the young man, filling a large goblet to the brim, and emptying it at a draught. "You are master of every farthing I possess." "Hum!" exclaimed Paravison, taking up a pack of cards, and snapping them between his finger and thumb. "You are married, Captain Disbrow?" What if I am? Cried the young man, becoming suddenly pale. What if I am? He repeated. I am told your wife is beautiful, replied Paravicin. Beautiful, ejaculated Pillicati, by the well-filled coffers of the widow of Watling Street. She is an angel. Beautiful is not the word, Mrs. Disbrow is divine. You have never seen her, said the young man, sternly. Ha, fire and fury. My word doubted, cried the Major, fiercely. I have seen her at the playhouses, at the Mulberry Garden, at court, and at church. Not seen her. By the one I have a Cyclops, but I have. You shall hear my description of her, and judge of its correctness. Imprimis, she has a tall and majestic figure, and might be a queen for her dignity. Go on, said Disbrow, by no means displeased with the commencement. Secondly, pursued Pillicati, she has a clear olive complexion, bright black eyes, hair and brows to match, a small foot, a pretty turn-up nose, a dimpling cheek, a mole upon her throat, the rosiest lips imaginable, an alluring look. No more, interrupted Disbrow. It is plain you have never seen her. Unbelieving pagan, exclaimed the Major, clapping his hand furiously upon his sword. I have done more, I have spoken with her. A lie, replied Disbrow, hurling a dice-box at his head. Ha! Roared Pillicati, in a voice of thunder, and pushing back his chair till it was stopped by the wall. Death and fiends! I will make mincemeat of your heart, and send it as a love-offering to your wife. And, whipping out his long rapier, he would have assaulted Disbrow, if Sir Paul had not interposed, and commanded him authoritatively to put up his blade. You shall have your revenge in a safer way, he whispered. Well, Sir Paul, rejoined the bully, with affected reluctance, as you desire it, I will spare the young man's life. I must wash away the insult in Burgundy, since I cannot do so in blood. With this, he emptied the flask next him, and called to a drawer, who was in attendance, in an imperious tone, to bring 2 more bottles. Paravicin, meanwhile, picked up the dice-box, and, seating himself, spread a large heap of gold on the table. I mentioned your wife, Captain Disbrow, he said, addressing the young officer, who anxiously watched his movements, not with any intention of giving you offense, but to show you that, although you have lost your money, you have still a valuable stake left. I do not understand you, Sir Paul, returned Disbrow, with a look of indignant surprise. To be plain, then, replied Paravicin, I have won from you £200, all you possess. You are a ruined man, and, as such, will run any hazard to retrieve your losses. I give you a last chance. I will stake all my winnings, nay, double the amount, against your wife. You have a key of the house you inhabit, by which you admit yourself at all hours, so at least the Major informs me. If I win, that key shall be mine. I will take my chance for the rest. Do you understand me now? I do, replied the young man, with concentrated fury. I understand that you are a villain. You have robbed me of my money, and would rob me of my honor. These are harsh words, sir, replied the knight, calmly, but let them pass. We will play first, and fight afterwards. But you refuse my challenge? It is false, replied Disbrow, fiercely, I accept it. And producing a key, he threw it on the table. My life is, in truth, set on the die, he added, with a desperate look, for if I lose, I will not survive my shame. You will not forget our terms, observed Paravicin. I am to be your representative tonight. You can return home tomorrow. Throw, sir, throw, cried the young man, fiercely. Pardon me, replied the knight, the first cast is with you. A single main decides it. Be it so, returned Disbrow, seizing the box. And as he shook the dice with a frenzied air, the Major and Lydiard drew near the table, and even Wyville roused himself to watch the result. 12, cried Disbrow, as he removed the box. My honor is saved. My fortune retrieved, huzzah! Not so fast, returned Paravicin, shaking the box in his turn. You were a little too hasty, he added, uncovering the dice. I am 12, too. We must throw again. This to decide, cried the young officer, again rattling the dice. 6. Paravicin smiled, took the box, and threw 10. Perdition, ejaculated Disbrow, striking his brow with his clenched hand. What devil tempted me to my undoing? My wife trusted to this profligate. Horror, it must not be. It is too late to retract, replied Paravicin, taking up the key, and turning with a triumphant look to his friends. Disbrow noticed the smile, and stung beyond endurance, drew his sword, and called to the knight to defend himself. In an instant, passes were exchanged. But the conflict was brief. Fortune, as before, declared herself in favor of Paravicin. He disarmed his assailant, who rushed out of the room, uttering the wildest ejaculations of rage and despair. I told you you should have your revenge, observed the knight to Pillicuddy, as soon as Disbrow was gone. Is his wife really as beautiful as you represent her? Words are too feeble to paint her charms, replied the Major. Shafts of Cupid. She must be seen to be appreciated. Enough, returned Paravicin. I have not made a bad night's work of it, so far. I' faith, Wyville, I pity you. To lose a heavy wager is provoking enough, but to lose a pretty mistress is the devil. I have lost neither yet, replied Wyville, who had completely recovered his spirits, and joined in the general merriment occasioned by the foregoing occurrence. I have been baffled, not defeated. What say you to an exchange of mistresses? I am so diverted with your adventure, that I am half inclined to give you the grocer's daughter for Disbrow's wife. She is a superb creature, languid as a Circassian, and passionate as an Andalusian. I can't agree to the exchange, especially after your rapturous description, returned Paravicin, but I'll stake Mrs. Disbrow against Amabel. The winner shall have both. A single cast shall decide, as before. No, replied Wyville, I could not resign Amabel if I lost. And the luck is all on your side tonight. As you please, rejoined the knight, sweeping the glittering pile into his pocket. Drawer, another bottle of Burgundy. A health to our mistresses, he added, quaffing a brimmer. A health to the grocer's daughter, cried Wyville, with difficulty repressing a shudder, as he uttered the pledge. A health to the rich widow of Watling Street, cried Pillicuddy, draining a bumper, and may I soon call her mine. I have no mistress to toast, said Lydiard, and I have drunk wine enough. Do not forget, gentlemen, that the plague is abroad. You are the death's head at the feast, Lydiard, rejoined Paravicin, setting down his glass. I hate the idea of the plague. It poisons all our pleasures. We must meet at noon tomorrow, at the Smyrna, to compare notes as to our successes. Before we separate, can I be of any further service to you, Wyville? I came here to enjoy your triumph, but, egad, I have found so admirable a bubble in that hot-headed Disbrow, whom I met at the Smyrna, and brought here to while away the time, that I must demand your congratulations upon mine. You have certainly achieved an easy victory over the husband, returned Wyville, and I trust your success with the wife will be commensurate. I require no further assistance. What I have to do must be done alone. Lydiard will accompany me to the house, and then I must shift for myself. Nay, we will all see you safe inside, returned Parabison. We shall pass by the grocer's shop. I know it well, having passed it 100 times, in the vain hope of catching a glimpse of its lovely inmate. I am glad it was a vain hope, replied Wyvil. But I must scale a wall to surprise the garrison. In that case you will need the rope ladder, replied Lydiard. It is in readiness. I will carry it, said Pillicati, picking up the ladder which was lying in a corner of the room, and throwing it over his shoulders. Bombs and batteries. I like to be an escalator when the forts of love are stormed. The party then set out. As they proceeded, Parabison ascertained from the Major that Disbrow's house was situated in a small street leading out of Piccadilly, but as he could not be quite sure that he understood his informant aright, he engaged him to accompany him and point it out. By this time they had reached Wood Street, and keeping in the shade, reconnoitred the house. But though Wyvil clapped his hands, blew a shrill whistle, and made other signals, no answer was returned, nor was a light seen at any of the upper windows. On the contrary, all was still and silent as death. The grocer's was a large old-fashioned house, built about the middle of the preceding century, or perhaps earlier, and had 4 stories, each projecting over the other, till the pile seemed completely to overhang the street. The entire front, except the upper story, which was protected by oaken planks, was covered with panels of the same timber, and the projections were supported by heavy beams, embellished with grotesque carvings. 3 deeply embayed windows, having stout wooden bars, filled with minute diamond panes, set in leaden frames, were allotted to each floor, while the like number of gables, ornamented with curiously carved coignes, and long molded leaden spouts, shooting far into the street, finished the roof. A huge sign, with the device of Noah's Ark, and the owner's name upon it, hung before the door. After carefully examining the house, peeping through the chinks in the lower shutters, and discovering the grocer seated by the bedside of his son, though he could not make out the object of his solicitude, Wyvil decided upon attempting an entrance by the backyard. To reach it, a court and a narrow alley, leading to an open space surrounded by high walls, had to be traversed. Arrived at this spot, Wyvil threw one end of the rope ladder over the wall, which was about 12 feet high, and speedily succeeding in securing it, mounted, and drawing it up after him, waved his hand to his companions, and disappeared on the other side. After waiting for a moment to listen, and hearing a window open, they concluded he had gained admittance, and turned to depart. And now for Mrs. Disbrow, cried Parabison. We shall find a coach or a chair in Cheapside. Can I take you westward, Lydiard? But the other declined the offer, saying, I will not desert Wyvil. I feel certain he will get into some scrape, and may need me to help him out of it. Take care of yourself, Parabison. Beware of the plague, and of what is worse than the plague, an injured husband. Good night, Major. Farewell, sir, returned Pillicati, raising his hat. A merry watching, and a good catching, as the sentinels were wont to say, when I served King Charles I. Sir Paul, I attend you.